Tonight, University of Ghana interdicts political science lecturers captured by the BBC in the alleged sex for grades scandal as the Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee commences investigations into the issue.
We would like to state unequivocally that the university places great importance on issues of sexual harassment and misconduct and condemn any such acts. Given that commitment, the Business and Executive Committee of the university has taken a decision to interdict Professor Ransford Jampo and Dr. Paul Kwame Butako, the two lecturers featured in the documentary, to allow for further investigation into the matter.
We'll hear Professor Jampo's reaction to the university's latest decision.
If the decision is to ask me to step aside while they do investigation, I think I welcome that decision, and I'll submit myself through the investigation processes. So I don't have issues with that. It's a step in the right direction.
Meanwhile, producers of the documentary have been defending their work, insisting it was a good job that met all the professional standards in spite of mixed public reaction.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion, also brought to you by Gasem Cement, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future is exciting, ready. In the last few minutes, the University of Ghana has tonight decided to interdict two of the lecturers captured by the BBC in its latest investigative documentary alleging sex for grades as the Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee commences investigations into the issue. Ghana's premier university, the University of Ghana, has been hit hard in this documentary with two of its well-known lecturers, political science lecturer Professor Ransford Jampo and the College of Education lecturer Dr. Paul Kwame Butako, implicated in the investigations. In fact, we can now go onto the phone lines because I have on the phone line with me Professor Ransford Jampo. Professor Jampo, thank you for your time here on Top Story. Professor Jampo, thank you for your time on Top Story.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, sir. Just before I come to you, I just want to quickly read the part of the statement that has to do with you, and it's signed by the PRO of the university, that is Stella Amwa, Director of Public Affairs, and she says that the attention of the university has been drawn to the documentary, and the university would like to state unequivocally that the university places great importance on the issues of sexual harassment and misconduct and condemn any act of such acts. Given that commitment, the business and executive committee of the university has taken a decision to interdict Professor Ransford Jampo and Dr. Paul Kwame Butako, the two lecturers featured in the documentary, to allow for further investigations into the matter. In line with university regulations, the two will be invited by the Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee in the next few days to assist with further investigations into the BBC documentary. Has this formally been communicated to you, Professor Jampo?
I think that is not really that shouldn't be the issue. I've had discussions, in the course of the day. There were some discussions between me and the university authorities, and so the decision to issue a statement, I was informed, about that decision. Basically, what I want to say, Evans, I think I'm talking to you because of the respect I have for you. Otherwise, you should understand that by this time, I am not in the right frame of mind to be granting interviews and all that. I just want to say that I respect the decision that has been taken by my university. I've always argued that we have our own internal mechanisms for dealing with issues that crop up. And so I respect the decision. You are going to be investigated, and it's a step aside so that the investigation can go on. So you cannot intrude or influence whatever is going on. I think it's a fair thing to be asked to do. And so I respect the decision. I accept it. I would cooperate with the committee and I'll submit myself to the processes. Basically, Evans, this is all I want to say. Beyond this, I don't want to say anything again.
Yesterday, when we spoke to you, you had indicated that today you'll be filing official processes to challenge the BBC's documentary. I don't know if that has happened.
Evans, basically, what I want to say is what I've said. I don't want to say anything again about this issue than to wait to be called so that I can submit myself to the processes that have been instituted. So I want you to agree with me or be tolerant or be respectful of this particular position of mine.
Yeah, I totally do. If you can share with me if they've told you the timelines for when you'll be invited and how long this is going to take.
I mean, I think this is just too early. I think this happened today, so I've not received any formal invitation from the committee, but I know in due course I'll receive. Given the urgency of the matter, I'm sure that it wouldn't be long that I will appear before them. It's important that this thing is done so that we clear the air once and for all, and the industry clears its own image. So it is fine with me.
Needless to say, you maintain your innocence in this matter.
Oh, I think you saw everything in the video, and I didn't set out to do what I was told I've done and all that. So I don't want to go again much into details about the matter. I think let us concentrate on what is happening now. And as I said, I respect the process. I will just submit myself to the process. And I'm sure that I know that at the end of the day, they will do a good job.
Professor Ransford Jampo, all the best as you submit yourself to the processes with the university.
I'm grateful.
And that is Professor Ransford Jampo, the man at the center of the controversy. He says he will submit himself to the investigations as has been commenced tonight by the university. And if you're just joining us, he and one other lecturer, Dr. Paul Kwame Butoko, have both been interdicted with immediate effect. The two lecturers were featured in the documentary, and this particular decision by the university is to allow for further investigations into the matter. And the university says, in line with its own internal regulations, the two will be invited by the Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee in the next few days to assist with further investigations into the BBC documentary. There's more in the statement that was issued today, including the university emphasizing its position on the matter of sexual exploitation. And my colleague Maxwell Ababa is with me with more on this. For the very first time, the university has put on paper what its real position is on the broad subject of exploitation. They actually put this within a context of power relations.
Exactly.
What is it that they're saying about?
Well, the university says it understands what goes with sexual harassment, and it knows that sexual harassment actually goes with power imbalances, exploitation, and voicelessness. For this reason, the university is saying that they've put in place measures to ensure that these things do not happen in the university. And you remember that when we spoke to the university authorities, they told us about measures that they've put in place to ensure that students know the rules and regulations governing sexual harassment on campus. They point to the anti-sexual harassment policy of the university, which was drafted in 2010 and reviewed in 2017. Well, the university in the statement is stating that they've taken measures to nip sexual harassment in the bud, and it is for that reason why they're going to take action on this particular issue, where two lecturers of the University of Ghana have been indicted, and then other outstanding cases. They say that for all the instances where students have reported issues of sexual harassment, they've made sure that they've taken action against the perpetrators.
I mean, there's a fundamental question that everybody, I guess, at this moment would like to ask. What is the process exactly that Professor Ransford Jampo and Dr. Paul Kwame Butako will have to go through, and what the likely outcomes could be? One, if they are found culpable, and two, if they are found to have done absolutely nothing wrong. There's a sense in the statement that gives you what these outcomes could be in the process. One, according to the university, they have to proceed provided they have the information and or evidence of sexual harassment or misconduct. And we know as of yesterday that the university has already written to the BBC asking for the raw footage, the real evidence backing the claims of sex for grades.
Exactly.
And so that is one part of it. They will need that information, that raw material from the BBC, beyond what we all watched in the near 1 hour video clip that the BBC put out yesterday. That's first part of it. And then also, the committee will investigate the matter, and the investigations will include interviewing the parties involved, as in Ransford Jampo, Dr. Paul Kwame Butako, but here's a tricky bit. In other instances, the university had investigated. It had to do with an accuser, then the accused.
Exactly.
In this case, it is an investigative journalist,
yeah,
who posed as a certain individual, represented herself as somebody,
exactly,
to try and uncover something. It begs the question: how will that play into the investigations? Because after you interview Jampo, who else would you speak to? Will you rely exclusively on the video footage to come to a conclusion? Well, that is the process in the past. They had interviewed all parties. If they were witnesses, they would have invited them as well, as part of this process. And now, after making a determination, that is after they've interviewed the parties involved, they make a determination. The university applied appropriate sanctions as outlined in the policy, and this is the bit that people have to pay attention to. It includes outright dismissals. That is the ultimate penalty you will pay if you are found guilty. Outright dismissal. And in fact, from the information we have, in the last couple of years since this vice chancellor came in, at least 2 professors, 2 lecturers at university have been dismissed for similar acts. So what it means is that Ransford Jampo and Dr. Paul Kwame Butako face possible dismissal if they are found at the end of the process to have conducted themselves that breached the guidelines. Now, here's a bit too. The university will also prosecute the current matter under investigation, in addition to all outstanding cases before the committee, which again indicating to us that they are not only looking at this, although that's where the focus is, but there may be other cases before the committee that they are already looking at as well.
Yeah.
Now, what does the university indicate whether or not, because Professor Jampo is a very famous person, they are going forward to tell us, give us some assurances?
Yes. So the university essentially is saying that it would continue to fight against sexual harassment, and at this point it is assuring all members of the university community. In fact, yesterday in the evening when we interacted with some students of the university, some of them raised concerns about coming out to speak out against some of this harassment. Some of them fear coming out, and the university today in the statement is assuring them that it would continue to fight these issues, and is assuring the members of the university community and the public that the university will use the existing structures to handle all matters of sexual harassment and misconduct while protecting the rights of the victims. One of the many reasons some of the students that we spoke to yesterday gave us, the female student gave us, that why they are unable to come out. They say that sometimes the victims are rather blamed instead of the perpetrators, and they spoke at length about how some of their colleagues in other tertiary institutions have come under fire because they came out to speak about some sort of harassment that they were facing, Evans.
Now, also, the university go on to say in the statement that the members of the university community are reminded of the provisions of the, anti-sexual harassment policy, and also encouraged to report any acts of sexual harassment and misconduct accordingly. How do you report?
Well, to the committee, you would have to report to. You can file a formal complaint, an informal complaint first, and then a formal complaint to the committee, and then they would investigate the matter.
Specifically, though, if you want to help to facilitate the process, additional communication channels have now been created.
Exactly.
And they've provided hotlines for students and lecturers who would like to report this. Walk us through the details.
Well, the hotline is 050-536-8053. That's the number to call. And then they also have an email addressed here. And the email address actually is hearmstory@ug.edu.gh. hearmystory@ug.edu.gh.
Okay, thank you, Maxwell, for that. If you're just joining us tonight, the University of Ghana has interdicted Professor Rasford Jampo and Dr. Paul Kwame Butoko, both lecturers captured in the BBC undercover investigations alleging sex for grades. They have been interdicted tonight. Just at the top of a few minutes ago, we spoke to Professor Jampo, who told us that he will submit to the process and he welcomes the probe because he believes he maintains his innocence and will cooperate fully with the investigations. Well, meanwhile, producers of the BBC's recently released, alleged sex for grace documentary, they've been defending their work, insisting it was a good job that met all the professional standards in spite of mixed public reactions. One of the lecturers, as you well know by now, Professor Jampo, has categorically denied the allegations, describing the contents as bogus, untrue, and defamatory. We want to listen to Kiki Mode. He's a lead producer of the BBC documentary. He's been speaking to my colleague Daniel Dadzi on a Super Morning Show today.
No, it wasn't entrapment. It was no such thing. And again, we didn't bait any lecturer. I remember I told you we spent 9 months investigating all of before we even considered secret filming, before we even considered that this is what we're going to do or we're going to wear body cameras. We spent all that time gathering evidence around the people that we eventually recorded, like around you, like we didn't randomly target anyone. Anybody that we uncovered in the film, it's because we had a humongous amount of evidence, even more that you can see on the film. Yes, in both cases, they had young women coming to them for academic help of variations of various kinds of academic help, basically, and they leveraged on that position. And from what we can see in the film, it was them being in that position to help it was in that space that they decided to make whatever advances that they made. So that is what is evident in the film.
So in previous Africa Eye investigations, we've seen that official complaints were lodged with authorities. For instance, with the number 12 documentary, FIFA was notified, GFA was notified, the government was notified. Has this been done in this case?
Well, I didn't oversee that thing, so I can't comment on that. But for this documentary,
did your agents go as a student of the University of Ghana?
My agent went in Nigeria. The agent went in for as students. In Ghana, one went seeking for masters, and one went in as a student, and the other went in for masters. One went in as a past student seeking masters and national service placement. I think the equivalent of that in Nigeria is National Youth Service Corps. So, yeah.
Yes, so there are two cases. With the Dr. Butako's case, one was a final year student who went in to seek help with masters. And yes, but I would like to ask, because with the other one, with Prof. Jampo's case, she went in to seek help with some academic work that she was doing. I wanted to know if she went as a student of the University of Ghana. Did she go as a student of the University of Ghana?
No, she can't. No, she didn't.
Right.
She went in. Yeah, she went in seeking help in the University of Ghana.
Okay, but not as a student of that university.
Sorry?
but not as a student of that university.
Yeah, one of them was a student, one of them was an ex-student looking to transfer or seeking clarity rather.
Well, that's Kiki Mulder there. She's the lead producer of the particular documentary. Make of that what you will. Well, whilst the investigations commences, some students of the University of Ghana say, although the institution is working to deal with the issue of sexual harassment on campuses, more has to be done to encourage the reporting of such cases. They want authorities of tertiary institutions to go beyond policies and take action. Journalist Maxwell Agbagba joined the university's Debate Society Monday meeting where the issue came up and was discussed after the premiering of the BBC's documentary Sex for Grades.
These acts coming down is really high because
the members of the University of Ghana Debate Society have just finished watching the Sex for Grades expose, which implicated two of their lecturers. It is their regular Monday meeting. I've met level 100 student Priscilla Owusu.
Prior to coming to the University of Ghana, I have heard of certain cases and several cases of ladies coming on social media to speak on their issues when it comes to situations like this. And it's very difficult to report because they believe that Ghana has a system of protecting the elderly. So if there is any sort of issue against the older person always wins.
Level 400 student Adepa Danso says most female students are unable to speak about harassment because the Ghanaian society continues to shame victims instead of perpetrators.
And we live in a system where we are constantly shaming victims and they are not able to come out because anytime they come out, we always have useless questions or questions that don't make sense that discredits what they actually have to say, what she was wearing. We don't know she was seducing the lecturer.
Level 400 student Jeremiah Sechi wants the University of Ghana to do more to eradicate sexual harassment.
The university has to do more than just posting stickers of zero tolerance for sexual harassment. There needs to be serious discussions and re-evaluation of our social definition.
President of the Legon chapter of the University Teachers Association of Ghana, Samuel Nkumban, has been talking about the position of UTAC on the matter.
Evidence is established against people who have committed or who have flouted the laws governing how we ought to operate. Then, of course, the law has to discourse.
One of the lecturers implicated in the expose, Ransford Jampo, has described the publication as defamatory.
My lawyers had prepared my suit even long before they aired. We saw the documentary, and so tomorrow morning we'll sue them.
Well, and you recall the top of the hour when I started the show, I asked Rafa Jumpo, who joined us live, and asked him if he's filed that yet. He says he's put that on hold for now. He want to focus on internal processes started by the university. Thankfully, I've just been joined on the telephone line by the Minister of State in charge of tertiary education, Professor Yanka. Professor Yanka, thank you for your time here on Top Story. We've lost him there. We'll try and reconnect. And ask his thoughts on the work that the university has done, but also the concern that this particular problem, it's a pervasive one found in almost all the universities across the country, not only at the tertiary level. In fact, some even make the point that the entire education system is replete with examples of sexual harassment, lecturers taking advantage of their students because of the uneven power relationships there. We can now hear from the chairperson of the Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee of the University of Ghana. We'll be speaking to her. We'll be hearing from her shortly about the processes and the difficulty they have in getting students to be represented in the attempt to deal with the matter. Professor Yanka, Professor Yanka is on the line with me now. Hello, Prof. Hello, Prof.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Top Story, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. So tell me, I'm pretty sure you followed the conversations around this alleged Sex for Grades scandal unearthed or uncovered by the BBC. Your reaction
to the story itself? You mean to the documentary?
To the documentary, yes.
It makes no news to me as a policymaker and as someone who has been following developments of policy within tertiary education in Ghana for a while. It's what is probably news is the fact that it has
taking a new dimension through the peering eyes of an internationally renowned news medium, which is BBC, which doesn't make our story easier as a continent that has been stereotyped all over these years for everything negative, from corruption to disease to ignorance to poverty. It doesn't do us any good. And as far as the story itself is concerned, it's nothing new. It's only a reminder that we should sit up and realize that the global village is looking at ways by which probably some of our best universities can be toppled, by scandals. That's the angle from which I would like
just
to
clarify. Is it your view that this is stereotypical?
Yes, it's stereotypical. I don't know if how many stories from international media organizations have been positive on higher education in Africa. It's all negative. It doesn't mean that it's of no importance to us. It doesn't mean we should relax on our oars. But I'm looking at it, first of all, from that angle. I am not surprised, because it doesn't take a BBC to tell us that we have an issue with sexual harassment in African universities or world universities, including UK. In our case, it doesn't redeem anything from us, because it makes our case worse, because we have very few redeeming features, and this doesn't really help us. I would like to see other more refreshing stories about African universities, about some of the strides that we are making, and not continuing to paint us the way they do. Because sexual harassment issues have been in higher education in Ghana here and elsewhere for a long time now, for which reason universities like University of Ghana has had a sexual harassment policy or anti-sexual harassment policy since 2010 or so. We were working on one such when I was the Pro-Vice Chancellor, and I think it was launched in 2010 or so. There's now an anti-sexual harassment committee on board. There's a SEGENSA Center for Gender and Gender Studies and Advocacy to sensitize the university all the more about issues on sexuality, issues on the weaker sex, and so on and so forth. So it is nothing that is now compelling us to start policy. And finally, if you look at the current tertiary education policy document, which we only recently developed and launched, I think the past 4 months or so, there's a comprehensive statement about sexual harassment. And it didn't take a BBC documentary to nudge us to do that, because it's an issue that has been contemplated, and for which reason various universities are taking steps to plug the loopholes. Central University, quite a number of private universities also have developed such. Not just developed them, but also personalized them. And I want to emphasize this, because it's one thing developing policies, putting these on the shelves, and another thing altogether, ensuring that these are effected and operationalized. At Central University, we started one such move. And it's unfortunate that universities have not been publicizing issues concerning sexual harassment and the sanctions and penalties that they have applied to seek to reduce the incidence.
You almost seem to suggest that this is, and clarify if that's the case, that the BBC unfairly targeting our universities, making us look bad in international framework, when there are positives that they haven't been focusing on. Is that a view that you're articulating?
Oh, yes. I mean, UNILAG, University of Lagos, clearly one of the top universities in Nigeria, and UG, clearly one of the best in West Africa. Just imagine that on the basis of the documentary alone, You have our top universities, or you have tertiary education virtually decapitated, virtually. It will be very bad news, but it doesn't mean we should ignore the fallout of this. We should be constantly reminded that these are some of the criteria that international students who would have liked to come to Legon or UNILAG would normally use in determining whether or not to consider enrolling here. It doesn't make our already bad image out there any better. That's what I'm saying.
Prof, but the BBC uncovered facts pre-existing that they simply shone a light on. It's not their fault, is it? The university has failed to deal with this matter and has festered. Yourself say you're not surprised, which means the problem was there and we have failed to deal with it.
That maybe the University of Ghana has not sufficiently been publicizing penalties and sanctions that they have applied.
But that is not the BBC's fault, is it? That they found
Legon is in a better position to tell what they have been publicizing about sexual harassment or sanctions that have. And secondly, no university would, out of its own volition, like to make this their topest priority in publicizing negativities within the university itself. But I know that quite a number of universities are doing something about it. What is good about this is probably as a further reminder that the world out there is watching.
But Prof, that's something that the universities are doing. Clearly hasn't worked, has it?
Well, as far as I know, I've not been pursuing to detail what Legon has been doing, but I know that they have a very comprehensive anti-sexual harassment policy, and you are aware that the chairman or the chairperson of that committee came out to make a statement. They are in a better position to tell whether they have sufficiently publicized the university's own sanctions and penalties they've been applying, much more than I do. But I'm saying that it shouldn't take a BBC to tell us this. And as I pointed out earlier, we now have a tertiary education policy document, which for the first time we are having in several years now. And there's a whole section on sexual harassment, compelling every university, public and private, so long as they are being considered for accreditation, to have such a policy, not just have such a policy, but to operationalize such a policy. And this has been used as one of the criteria to be considered by the regulatory body in determining whether to re-accredit a university that already has accreditation and so on and so forth. So yes, we now have a clearly articulated tertiary education policy that highlights sexual harassment as an important challenge that we have to take up.
What would you, beyond the BBC, what would you say to the thousands of female students who this week have said that they believe universities, administrators, policymakers have failed them, and it's just BBC simply did an honest job in articulating their voice that has been silent for so long? What would you say to these thousands of young women who have been caught up and have been speaking this week on this issue?
We are all lamenting what has happened. We keep lamenting this all the time, that the already low percentage of female participation in tertiary education, which is now 41%, can even be worsened, if we don't provide an atmosphere or an environment that is friendly to the female sex. So we would like to assure them that we now have a tertiary education policy which is binding on all tertiary education institutions, on all universities, private and public, and that we expect universities to abide by, in ensuring that there's equity, gender balance, and that the 50-50 parity that we expect can only be between male and female enrollment, or in female and male enrollment, can only be achieved if we tell the parent handing over their son or daughter to us that we have provided an environment that is safe and secure for both the male sex and the weaker sex.
On the back of this particular documentary, will anything more change in the approach, or it is your view that what is already being done is enough?
As I'm saying, we just launched a policy document, the first time in several years. If the policy ought to be seen to be working, then of course the universities ought to be taking the policy much more seriously.
Is it working?
And also, we assure you that we are going to effectively ensure the effective implementation of the policy, along with all the penalties and sanctions that are available to be applied when there are any infractions.
The university today just issued a statement. They have decided to interdict the 2 professors accused in the report. Is that a decision and an action in keeping with the policy, and is something you endorse?
Interdiction is always a preliminary step, an interim measure that any institution can take while waiting for investigations and the final outcome of the investigations, which in itself will determine the final sanctions or penalty where relevant that will be applied. I fully endorse the University of Ghana action.
And very finally, there are many who say this particular problem, it is not a university problem. It's not a tertiary education problem. It is an education problem right from our basic all the way through to the universities. If you agree with that, is there a dedicated, I guess, government policy to deal with this at all levels of education?
It is beyond education. It is in employment, in HR. It's all over the place, in every sector of the economy, not just education. We should look at the issue of integrity, national integrity. In the area of education, it's all the more important because the education sector is the area where you least expect one type of corruption or the other. And when it comes to promiscuity, particularly a sector where you have considerable involvement of churches, it is a sector that should be considered particularly sensitive when it comes to morality issues.
I am most grateful, sir, for joining us here on Top Story and on Newsnight.
You're welcome.
That is Professor Yanka. He is the Minister of State in charge of tertiary education. His views have just been aired there. What do you make of his fundamental position that this BBC documentary is stereotypical, stereotyping this part of the world, and it's a continuation, or he believes, of an attempt to demonize our universities. He believes strongly that there's a lot of positives happening and the policies already in place to deal with this, and doesn't take the BBC, he says, to tell us what is going wrong in our universities. Do you agree with that view? Share your thoughts with me. 0244 340 437. Newsnight starts shortly. We'll bring you the Professor Jampo's own reaction to him being interdicted shortly, right after this break.
Ma, please give me your phone. Let me make a quick call.
So you're still on that network?